Why did no one notice the old woman leave the room? That question would haunt them for years, because in exactly 18 minutes, a shadow on a distant hill would change everything. It began like any other morning at Forward Operating Base Echo, a lonely outpost tucked deep into the Hindu Kush Mountains where the air was razor-thin and silence always felt like a warning. At 400, the world was still asleep, but Mary Collins wasn't. 52 years old, maintenance crew, coffee lady, the woman who welded broken Humvee frames and poured black sludge into tin mugs that kept men alive through exhaustion. She moved quietly through the motor pool, her breath fogging in the mountain chill. Her hands, scarred, rough, arthritic, worked with mechanical rhythm. No one ever really looked at those hands. If they had, maybe they'd have recognized the way she handled tools, not like a mechanic, but like someone who'd memorized precision under pressure. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Sparks flashed as she welded a cracked vehicle strut, the blue flame reflecting in her green eyes. They were the kind of eyes that had seen too much and learned the cost of silence. By 5:30 the base was awake, engines rumbling, voices shouting, the metallic heartbeat of war beginning another day. That's when Staff Sergeant Tommy Hawk Rodriguez swaggered in with his SEAL team. He was built like a statue, bald head shining under the light, muscles stretching the limits of his green t-shirt. He led with the kind of arrogance only earned by surviving too many fights and believing you were unbreakable. Behind him came Petty Officer Jake Mitchell, always recording life through his phone, Alex Santos, sharp-tongued and restless, and Danny Park, the comms man who never looked up from his gear. Rodriguez smirked when he saw her. "Well, well, look who's playing mechanic again." Mary didn't answer. She just adjusted her welding mask and kept working. Rodriguez strolled past and, oops, his elbow knocked her mug off the workbench. Hot coffee splattered across her tools, dripping from the steel. "My bad, Grandma. Guess those old hands aren't as steady as they used to be." The others laughed. Mitchell raised his phone. "Perfect. Look at this base maintenance featuring the world's oldest coffee maker. What do you think, boys? Upload it." Santos pointed at her faded jacket hanging on the hook nearby, the one with the almost erased bird emblem on the shoulder. "What's that supposed to be? A chicken?" "Maybe it was," Park chuckled. "Looks like roadkill." Their laughter echoed across the bay, the cruel sound bouncing off metal walls. Mary said nothing. She just reached for a rag, cleaned the spill, and went back to welding, the torch humming louder than their insults. From the doorway, Master Chief Patricia Wells watched the scene in silence. 28 years in the Navy. She'd seen enough to know when something didn't add up. There was something about Mary Collins, the way she stood, the stillness in her shoulders. Not fear, not submission, something else, something waiting. "Rodriguez," Wells called out, voice sharp as gravel. "Mission briefs at 800. You got something better to do." Rodriguez grinned. "Just reminding the support crew about the pecking order, Chief." "Get gone," she said, eyes narrowing. The SEALs left, their laughter trailing behind them like diesel smoke. Mary said nothing. She finished the weld, set her tools aside, and poured herself another cup of coffee. At 800, the mess hall was packed. 200 people, noise and heat and motion. Rodriguez and his men sat at the center table, loud as always. Mary sat alone near the wall. She didn't look up when Rodriguez's voice cut through the chatter. "You should have seen her face when I knocked over that coffee, like a confused puppy." More laughter. Mitchell grinned down at his phone. "Already 200 likes. Comment section says we should start a series. Granny goes to war." The laughter grew. Soldiers joined in who didn't even know what they were laughing about. It was just easy. Easier than noticing the quiet woman they mocked was listening and remembering. But not everyone laughed. Frank Williams, the base cook, just shook his head. He'd seen things others hadn't, how she could predict which vehicles would break down, how she always seemed to know the weather before the radar did. Captain Maria Torres from intelligence entered, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on Mary. "Collins," she called. Mary looked up. "Ma'am." "You were watching the weather radar yesterday. Notice anything unusual?" Mary set down her fork. "Low pressure from the north, not typical for this season, should create downdrafts around 1600 hours in the valley." Torres blinked, impressed. "That's specific. How do you know that?" Mary's tone was quiet, steady. "Been here 2 years, you learn patterns." Rodriguez overheard and snorted. "Oh great, now she's a meteorologist too. What's next? You gonna teach us tactics, Grandma?" Mary's gaze lifted to him for half a second, and in that second something flickered. Not anger, not fear, just memory. Then it was gone. She went back to eating, calm and silent. Santos leaned back in his chair. $20 says she can't even hold a rifle. 50 says she'd cry at the sound of one, Park added. The bets went around. Soldiers laughed, money changed hands, and the moment passed unnoticed except by Wells and the base interpreter, Ahmed. Because as Mary stood to leave, her sleeve slid up just enough to reveal a round scar on her shoulder, perfectly circular, star-shaped. The unmistakable mark of a high-caliber exit wound. Wells noticed, Ahmed noticed, but by the time they processed it, Mary had already left the hall. Outside, the sun burned white over the mountains. The air smelled like dust and metal. At 1400 hours, Rodriguez's team geared up for a routine patrol through Tangi Valley. Routine, the word that always came before tragedy. Mary was by the motor pool again, pretending to check fluid levels. But her eyes were on the sky, the cloud buildup forming the same downdraft pattern she'd mentioned. "Storm's coming in wrong," she murmured. Rodriguez stopped, rolling his eyes. "What's that, Grandma?" "The wind's shifting. Your comms might." "Did I ask for a weather report?" he snapped. "Stick to the coffee pot, yeah." Mary just nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." But as the convoy rolled out, 4 Humvees, engines roaring, her eyes followed them all the way to the gate. She knew something they didn't. She could feel it in her bones. 15 minutes later, she walked into the communications center. The night operator, Sarah Kim, blinked in surprise. "Collins, you need something." "Keep a backup channel open," Mary said. 47.9 megahertz. Kim frowned. "That's not protocol. Who authorized that?" Mary hesitated just long enough for her tone to carry weight. "Please, just trust me." Something in her voice made Kim obey without another question. By the time the convoy disappeared into the haze, Mary was climbing the observation tower. Her knees screamed with every step. The arthritis made her grip falter on the ladder, but she kept going. At the top, she raised an old pair of binoculars, civilian model, scratched and faded, and scanned the ridgelines. She saw it before the drones did. Tire tracks crossing the road near grid 3792. Fresh, too fresh. The kind left by something heavy and waiting. Down in the command center, Colonel Harrison was reviewing reports. He didn't notice the flicker of worry in Lieutenant Jackson's voice. "Sir, Team 7 just passed Checkpoint Bravo, all quiet." "Copy that," Harrison replied. But Mary knew better. She could feel the tension building in the wind. It was too quiet, too still. And somewhere out there, in the storm forming earlier than predicted, something was waiting for Rodriguez's team. At 1600 hours, it hit. The first explosion turned the sky orange. The second swallowed the sound. "Contact, contact," Rodriguez's voice ripped through the radios. "Multiple hostiles, we're surrounded." In the command center, chaos erupted. Screens flickered to life. The drone feed showed 4 American Humvees boxed in by enemy fire, trapped in a narrow canyon. 8 SEALs, 40 insurgents. No backup within 45 minutes. Harrison slammed his fist on the table. "Where's our QRF?" "Still spinning up, sir. 45 to target." They don't have 45 minutes. The feed stuttered, then stabilized, showing muzzle flashes from 3 sides. The SEALs had taken defensive positions, but the valley was a kill box. No cover, no escape. In the middle of the chaos, no one noticed the old woman in the corner of the room, the one who'd been standing silently through the storm of radio chatter. Her eyes were locked on the map. Ridge 447, 1,200 meters, perfect elevation. Mary Collins turned and walked away without a word. Nobody saw her leave. But in 18 minutes, the shadow on that ridge would start firing, and the world would remember that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the deadliest one on Earth. How fast can a forgotten woman move when 8 lives depend on her? Faster than memory, faster than pain. Mary Collins was already running before the command center realized she was gone. Outside, the wind screamed through the Hindu Kush. Dust clouds rose like ghosts, swirling around the base in violent spirals. The storm had come early, she'd known it would. Her boots struck the gravel, quick and precise. No hesitation, no wasted motion. For 2 years she'd shuffled through this base, invisible. Now every step carried the weight of a secret she'd buried under layers of routine and silence. She reached the armory. Sergeant Davis was glued to his phone, watching the live feed of the ambush. He barely glanced up. "Bad one out there," he muttered. "Team 7's pinned, 40 hostiles." Mary didn't answer. She moved past him, deeper into the weapon racks. The standard-issue rifles gleamed under fluorescent light, M4s, SCARs, precision semi-autos, but she bypassed them all. Her hand stopped on a black case tucked in the back corner, half forgotten under dust and inventory tags. Remington 700, bolt action, old school, outdated by every modern metric, officially destroyed in a fire 3 years ago. Mary opened the case. Inside, the rifle rested like an old friend waiting for her return. She checked the barrel clean, the bolt smooth, the serial number filed off by her own hand. She reached into her duffel and pulled out a small box of .308 match-grade rounds. 18 of them, each one hand-loaded, perfectly balanced. She slid them into the magazine pouch of a weathered backpack, the same bag she'd used a lifetime ago under a different name. Raven 9. Captain Torres was walking past when she saw Mary emerge. For a heartbeat, the sight didn't register, the coffee lady carrying a rifle like she was born with it. "Collins, what are you doing?" Mary's reply was soft, almost kind. "Check your records, Operation Blackbird, 2019. And then she was gone, stepping into the storm. The climb to Ridge 447 was brutal. 1,200 meters of elevation in 30 minutes. Loose shale, wind cutting like glass. The kind of climb that kills the young and breaks the old. Mary's lungs burned. Her knee screamed, the old injury from Mosul flaring with every step. But she didn't stop. Every breath, every movement was calculation. 14 seconds inhale, 7 hold, 8 exhale. The rhythm that had carried her through hell. Halfway up, lightning flashed behind the clouds, briefly illuminating the valley below. Through the storm haze, she could see faint flashes, muzzle fire, RPG trails, tracer arcs painting desperate geometry in the dark. 8 SEALs holding the line. She could almost hear Rodriguez's voice over the static. "We're surrounded," requesting immediate support. Support wasn't coming. But she was. Inside the command center, Colonel Harrison's world was unraveling. The drone feed showed chaos. The convoy boxed in, fire raining from 3 sides. "Where's that damn air support?" 45 minutes out, sir." "They don't have 45 seconds. The screens flickered again, dust interference breaking up the signal. Through it all, Master Chief Wells stood silent, studying the topography map. Her eyes narrowed. "Ridge 447, she whispered. "What?" Harrison barked. She pointed at the elevation lines. If someone were up there, perfect overwatch on the valley. Who? She didn't answer, because part of her already knew. Mary reached the ridgeline as the first drops of rain hit her face. The air was electric, charged with dust and thunder. She dropped prone behind a cluster of rocks and pulled out the rifle. Wind from the northwest at 15 knots. Barometric pressure 620 millibars. Range to target 1,218 meters. She didn't need electronics. Her mind did the math automatically, windage, drop, drift. Years of training condensed into instinct. Her left hand steadied the rifle. Her right adjusted the old loophole scope she'd rebuilt from spare parts. Through the lens, the battlefield snapped into focus, a nightmare in motion. The SEALs were pinned between burning vehicles. One was down, Santos, shoulder wound, bleeding fast. Rodriguez and Mitchell trading bursts from behind twisted steel. Mary exhaled. The world narrowed to a single heartbeat. She found her first target, an insurgent crouched with an RPG, sighting down toward Rodriguez's position. Breathe in, hold, exhale, squeeze. The rifle bucked gently, a muted crack swallowed by wind. The gunner's head snapped back, silent collapse. 14 seconds later, the second shot. A commander shouting orders. He dropped mid-sentence. Another 14 seconds. A machine gunner, gone. The pattern was steady, surgical. Breathe, aim, fire, cycle. 18 rounds, 18 prayers. Below, chaos turned to confusion. The ambush dissolved into panic. Fighters looked for a phantom in the storm, firing blindly at ridges that gave no answer. In the command center, the drone operator finally caught it. Sir, Ridge 447 thermal signature, one shooter. Harrison leaned forward, incredulous. One. Yes, sir, just one. On screen, a single heat source lay prone, methodically cycling a bolt. Every 14 seconds, another flash. Another body fell. Who the hell is that? Wells stared. She knew that rhythm. That's Delta Force doctrine, she said quietly. But slower, adjusted for pain. I've seen it once before. Torres burst into the room, tablet in hand, breathless. Colonel, you need to see this. She handed him a classified file, redactions thick as tar. Operation Blackbird, November 9th, 2019. Operator Coulson Raven 9. Status, MIA presumed KIA. Confirmed eliminations, 127. Self-extracted after 43 days behind enemy lines. Harrison's voice dropped to a whisper. That's impossible. Raven 9 was declared dead. No, Torres said. Missing, body never recovered. On the monitor, the lone sniper adjusted position, shifting slightly, compensating for the wind. The same profile Torres had just seen in the photograph file. God help us, Wells murmured. She's been here the whole time. Down in the valley, Rodriguez felt the shift before he understood it. The gunfire thinning, the pressure easing. Someone's out there, Mitchell shouted over the storm. I know, Rodriguez answered. Question is who? Then through the wind he heard it. The faint, rhythmic cracks echoing from the ridge, 14-second intervals, each one saving another life. By the sixth shot, the battlefield was silent except for rain and the distant hum of rotor blades. The quick reaction force finally arrived, too late to save anyone, yet right on time to witness a miracle. Rodriguez peeked over the Humvee hood. Dozens of enemy fighters lay still, 18 confirmed, all precise, no misses. Whoever you are, he muttered, staring toward Ridge 447, thank you. Up on the ridge, Mary worked the bolt one final time, ejected the spent casing and began collecting the brass. Old habit, leave nothing behind. 18 cases, 18 lives. She slid them into her pack, stood slowly, knees trembling. The storm had broken. Light filtered through the clouds, turning the valley gold. For a brief moment, she allowed herself a breath of relief. Not victory, never that, just survival. Then she turned and began the descent. By the time she returned to the base, the chaos was over, the valley secure, the helicopters gone, the medics working. No one saw her enter through the maintenance gate. No one questioned the woman with grease-stained hands returning to her workshop. She placed the rifle back into its case, cleaned and oiled, wiped each brass casing until it gleamed. 17 she kept in a pouch. One she held longer than the rest, the first shot, the one that had saved Rodriguez. She set it on her workbench like an offering. The base was still buzzing with aftermath when Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the radio. "I want that ridge searched, every inch. Someone was up there." Lieutenant Jackson replayed drone footage. "Sir, I have visual of movement. One figure descending the rear slope. Gait analysis shows not young, limping." Wells frowned. "That's not a soldier, that's someone pushing through pain." Torres stared at her screen. "Sir, the timestamp. She reached base perimeter exactly when Collins signed out of comms to check generator noise." Harrison turned toward her. "You're saying—" "I'm not saying anything," Torres interrupted, "but I think we've been working alongside a ghost." The mess hall that night was quiet. No laughter, no mocking, just whispers. 18 enemy KIA, 0 SEAL fatalities. A miracle, they called it. The ghost of Tangi Valley, some said. A guardian angel. Rodriguez sat apart from his team, hands shaking as he replayed his bodycam footage. The pattern, 14 seconds between shots, always 14. He didn't understand why that number stuck in his mind, only that it mattered. Mitchell approached, hesitating. "You think it was her?" Rodriguez didn't look up. "I don't know, but if it was, I owe her more than an apology." In the motor pool, Mary Collins worked under flickering light. Her faded jacket hung nearby, the raven emblem catching the reflection from the welding arc. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, distant now, but echoing like memory. She turned off the torch and sat in silence. Her hands were trembling again, not from age, but from adrenaline fatting. The same post-mission shake she'd fought to forget. Her eyes drifted to the brass casing on the bench. She reached out, tracing the number etched into its base. 1. The first of 18. A whisper escaped her lips. "Heroes save heroes." No one heard her. But across the base, men who had once mocked her sat awake in their bunks, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how they were still alive. Somewhere deep down they already knew. The coffee lady had disappeared into the storm, and the storm had answered back. Who saves heroes when the world thinks they're dead? That question was on everyone's mind at Forward Operating Base Echo the next morning. The ambush was over, but the shockwaves hadn't faded. In the command center, the air still smelled like burnt coffee and sweat. Maps covered the tables, drone footage played on loops, and every conversation came back to one thing: the sniper. 18 confirmed kills. No misses. All from a ridge no one could have reached in time. Rodriguez stood beside Colonel Harrison's desk, his face pale beneath layers of grime and exhaustion. "Sir," he said quietly, "whoever that was out there, they saved us, but it wasn't luck. Those shots—" "I saw," Harrison interrupted. His voice was low, controlled, the way men sound when they're trying to contain something too big for language. "We're identifying the shooter now." Across the room, drone operator Blake scrubbed through the footage frame by frame. The image was grainy, a lone figure prone on the ridge, rain sweeping sideways across their body. The rifle flashed every 14 seconds. The pattern was impossible to miss. "Can you enhance it?" Master Chief Wells asked. Blake tried. The picture sharpened just enough to show the outline of a small frame, steady hands, calm amid chaos. "That's not one of ours," Wells whispered. "No spotter, no electronic support, that's pure manual shooting." Captain Torres was at her terminal, eyes darting between classified files. "Whoever it is, they knew our grid references, our patrol schedules. They had encrypted frequencies. Harrison frowned. So, either we have an unauthorized sniper operating in our AO, or someone hiding in plain sight, Torres finished. The room fell silent. Outside, the base stirred under gray light. The storm had passed, leaving the mountains sharp and clean against the horizon. Soldiers walked slower that morning, voices hushed. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone had theories. Maybe it was a special ops unit, someone said at breakfast. Could have been Air Force, another replied. Nah, a third muttered. They say she came out of nowhere, a woman, old maybe. Frank the cook shook his head, stirring a pot. You don't survive ambushes like that cause of luck. Whoever she was, she knew exactly what she was doing. Rodriguez and his team entered the mess hall to a round of applause they hadn't earned. People called them heroes, slapped their backs, shoved food onto their trays. But Rodriguez couldn't stop thinking about the ridge. The muzzle flashes, the rhythm, 14 seconds apart every time. He set down his tray untouched. Where, Mary? He asked suddenly. Santos, arm in a sling, looked up. The coffee lady, probably in the motor pool. Rodriguez didn't answer. He stood, walked out of the hall and followed the sound of welding. The maintenance bay was dim. Sparks flickered against steel. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. Mary Collins was there, as always, welding a cracked section of a Humvee's frame. Her movements were slow, deliberate, the same quiet rhythm. Rodriguez stopped in the doorway. For a long moment he just watched her. Morning, Sergeant, she said without turning. Coffee still hot. He stepped closer, voice rough. We lost comms halfway through the fight. Then someone started dropping tangos from the ridge. Every shot perfect, every shot clean. Mary paused her welding. The arc light faded. She lifted her mask and looked at him with calm green eyes. Sounds like a good shooter. Don't play me, Rodriguez said. You knew that valley better than anyone. You warned me about the storm. Mary turned back to her work. I fix things, Sergeant, that's all. Her tone was even, almost gentle, the kind people use when deflecting bullets made of truth. Rodriguez exhaled, frustrated. You can deny it all you want, but whoever was up there saved my team, saved me. Mary didn't respond. The torch hissed back to life. Sparks danced across the steel. In the command center, Tor's investigation was yielding results. She managed to decrypt fragments of a file buried under multiple classification layers. The same phrase appeared again and again. Operation Blackbird, Raven 9. She traced the mission timeline, November 2019. Delta Force, classified objective, 6 operators inserted into Coast Province, 5 confirmed KIA, 1 missing. The missing operator's status, MIA, presumed dead. Specialty, long-range reconnaissance and counter-sniper operations. Female. Tor's breath caught. She printed the fragment, grabbed the photo attached, and sprinted toward the colonel's office. Sir, you need to see this. Harrison took the document, scanning quickly. Most of it was blacked out, but one image survived the redactions, a Delta team posing for a pre-mission photo. One woman at the center, holding a Barrett rifle, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. Raven 9, Torres said. Presumed dead in 2019, but her file, it's got inconsistencies. No confirmed remains, no DNA match, and her psych eval, she hesitated. It mentions post-traumatic stress, guilt, insomnia, recommended medical discharge, but she vanished before the paperwork finalized. Wells leaned over. So she disappeared 5 years ago and showed up 2 years ago as Mary Collins, maintenance technician. Torres nodded. Her employment history starts January 2020. No fingerprints on record. Hired through a civilian contract program that bypassed deep verification. The colonel looked from the paper to the map. Ridge 447, Tangi Valley, the 14-second pattern. It all aligned like fate. He stood abruptly, Get me Rodriguez. They found him in the motor pool, still watching Mary work. Sergeant Harrison said, "Outside now." Mary didn't look up as Rodriguez followed the colonel out. Her hand stayed steady on the weld, but her heartbeat had changed. She could feel it thudding against her ribs like a memory trying to resurface. When the men were gone, she shut off the torch and took a slow breath. Then she opened the small metal box hidden under her workbench. Inside were the 17 empty casings, polished to a dull gleam. One was missing, the one she'd left on her table last night. She traced her fingers over the brass, over the faintly carved letters R9. A knock sounded behind her. Captain Torres stood in the doorway, eyes soft but searching. "I ran your name through back channels," she said quietly. "You were never fingerprinted because the military already had them, sealed under a different identity." Mary didn't move. "I found the photo," Torres continued. "Delta Force Operation Blackbird. You were there, weren't you?" Mary's voice was a whisper. "Was." Torres stepped closer. "They said you were killed." "I was," Mary said simply, "just not fast enough." In the command center, the rest of the team gathered: Harrison, Wells, Rodriguez, Torres. The walls hummed with tension. "All right," Harrison said. "We're keeping this off record for now. The Pentagon can wait. I want confirmation. Is Mary Collins our sniper?" Rodriguez stared at the table. "I don't need confirmation. I saw the way she moved. The way she talked about wind and terrain. That wasn't luck." Torres placed the file down. Raven 9 was one of Delta's best. She ran overwatch for her team on Blackbird. They walked into an ambush, over 300 hostiles. She covered their retreat for 17 minutes, then vanished. 43 days later, she walked out alone. 43 days, Wells repeated quietly. "What kind of person survives that?" "The kind that disappears afterward," Torres said. The door opened. Mary walked in. No escort, no hesitation. Her jacket was zipped to the collar, the faded Raven emblem catching the dim light. "Colonel," she said evenly, "you wanted to see me." Harrison studied her face, the lines, the exhaustion, the calm. "Where were you during the ambush?" "Working," she replied. "Maintenance bay, check the cameras." Torres already had them up on her tablet. Sure enough, there was Mary welding at the exact time the sniper fire occurred. Timestamp verified. But as Torres scrubbed through the footage, she froze. The pattern was wrong. The welding sparks were too consistent, too evenly timed. "It's looped," she whispered. She looped the feed. Rodriguez's voice broke through, trembling with disbelief. "You hacked the base's security system." Mary's gaze didn't waver. That would be complicated for a coffee lady. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Finally Wells spoke. 18 shots. You recovered 17 casings. Why leave one behind?" Mary looked at her, eyes unreadable. "Because sometimes people need to believe in miracles, even soldiers." Rodriguez stepped forward, jaw tight. "That morning I knocked over your coffee. We laughed at you, treated you like nothing. Then you," his voice cracked, "you saved us." Mary set her welding gloves on the table, her hands scarred and trembling. "Staff Sergeant, you don't owe me anything." "The hell I don't," Rodriguez said, his voice breaking. "You risked your life for us. Why?" Mary's eyes softened. "Because I've watched a team die once before. I wasn't going to let it happen again." For the first time her mask cracked, her voice trembled. "You reminded me of them. Young, fearless, thinking the world couldn't touch you. They thought that too until it did." Rodriguez lowered his head. His massive frame seemed small in that moment. Slowly, deliberately, he sank to one knee. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "thank you." The others followed, Mitchell, Park, even wounded Santos, leaning on his good arm. 4 of America's elite kneeling before a mechanic in grease-stained coveralls. It should have looked absurd. It didn't. Mary shook her head. "Get up. SEALs don't kneel, not to anyone." They rose, but the air had shifted. The invisible line between myth and truth had dissolved. Harrison dismissed everyone except Rodriguez and Mary. The others left reluctantly, leaving behind silence and truth. He reached into his desk and pulled out a sealed red folder. "Before I open this," he said slowly, "I need to know something. Are you Mary Collins or Raven 9? Mary met his gaze. "I've been Mary Collins for 3 years, Colonel. Before that," she gave a small, weary shrug. "Before that was someone else." Harrison opened the folder. Inside was a photograph, Delta Force 6 operators. The woman in the center, younger but unmistakable. Mary's fingers brushed the image. Her voice was distant. Phoenix, Hammer, Ghost, Joker, Titan, all gone in 17 minutes. Her eyes glistened. "I was Overwatch, 1,200 meters out, just like Tangi Valley. I watched them die through my scope, tried to save them, I couldn't." She swallowed hard. "Titan had a daughter he never met. I promised I'd tell her her father was a hero, but I never kept it. I disappeared instead." Rodriguez's throat tightened. "So you became her, the coffee lady." Mary nodded. "To fix things instead of breaking them, to be invisible, to serve quietly, to stop fighting the world and start holding it together." The colonel closed the file. "Then why today? Why reveal yourself?" Mary looked at him, eyes steady again. "Because you can only run from purpose for so long." Outside, thunder rolled again, softer this time, like applause from distant ghosts. And somewhere in that sound, Mary Collins, Raven 9, found a piece of peace she hadn't felt in years. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? For Mary Collins, it announced itself in the dark, 3 gunshots and a broken window. Hours had passed since the confrontation in the command center. The base was quiet now, the kind of quiet that only comes after truth detonates in a room. Rodriguez's team had retreated to the barracks, still processing everything. Harrison hadn't said a word since closing that red folder. Mary had returned to the motor pool. Same bench, same tools, same silence. But something was different now. The air felt heavy, charged, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. She sat on a stool, rubbing oil into the Remington she'd already cleaned, not because it needed it, but because her hands needed something to do. Across the workshop, the single overhead light buzzed softly, flickering just slightly, almost like a heartbeat. Her reflection shimmered in a half-polished panel of metal. Not the same woman who'd arrived at Echo 2 years ago. Not Raven 9 either. Something in between. For a moment, she let herself remember Blackbird. The firefight, the radio silence, the screams through static. The way her rifle had grown so hot, she could smell the oil burning off the bolt. She closed her eyes. The sound still lived there behind her eyelids. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a power surge, a full blackout. Every instinct in her body snapped awake. "Rodriguez," she whispered, already moving. Before she could reach the door, the first bullet shattered the window behind her. Glass exploded across the workbench, scattering wrenches and brass like shrapnel. Mary dropped instantly, pulling Rodriguez down with her as he entered from the side hallway. "Get down," she hissed. "Ahoo!" 3 more shots ripped through the darkness. Sparks from ricochets lit the room in momentary flashes. "Stay behind the lift," she ordered. Her voice was low, controlled. All trace of the coffee lady gone. Mary reached under the workbench and pulled out a weapon that officially didn't exist, a Glock 19, its slide worn smooth by years of use. She checked the chamber by feel alone. Loaded. Rodriguez's breath came fast. "How the hell did you?" "Later." She crawled low, keeping to the shadows, counting seconds between bursts of gunfire. The shooter was disciplined. Short, controlled volleys, professional, not insurgent fire, someone trained. From outside, a faint glint caught her eye reflection on a rifle scope. She memorized the angle, 2 degrees left of the fuel drums. She exhaled slowly. Then she rose just enough to clear the workbench. 3 shots. 1 target. Silence. Rodriguez's ears rang in the sudden stillness. You hit him." Mary's breathing was steady. "Of course I did." Emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in red. Harrison's voice crackled over the base intercom. "Security lockdown. Repeat lockdown. Intruder on base perimeter." Mary holstered the pistol. "You'll find one less now." Within minutes, the place was alive with motion. Soldiers shouting, boots pounding gravel, spotlights cutting through the night. Outside, the body lay still, an Afghan male in base fatigues, ID tag reading Corporal Anderson. His rifle was American issue. His comm device, Taliban frequency. Harrison arrived, face grim. "One of ours." Mary didn't flinch. "No, he just wore the uniform." They searched his gear. Inside his vest was a flash drive, sealed in plastic. Torres plugged it into a secured laptop and froze. "It's all here," she murmured. "Patrol routes, coordinates, mission times. He's been sending them out 15 minutes before every ambush." Harrison's jaw clenched. "How long?" 6 months. Wells knelt beside the body. "Then it wasn't just him." Mary nodded slowly. "No, you don't compromise a base this size alone." Her voice carried a calm certainty that drew the others' attention. For the first time, nobody questioned her authority. The next 12 hours were chaos. Investigations, arrests, the unraveling of a network that had been hiding in plain sight. By dawn, 3 more names emerged, one from logistics, one from supply, one from the radio relay team. Rodriguez stared at the report, jaw tightening. "Davis," he said in disbelief. "He's been here longer than me." Mary leaned against the table, exhaustion pulling at her bones. "Trust the obvious," she murmured. "That's how you get killed." Torres glanced at her. "You've been watching this for a while, haven't you?" Mary hesitated. "I noticed the patterns. Comm spikes on 47.9 megahertz 15 minutes before every hit. I was tracking it, waiting for proof." "And you didn't tell anyone?" Mary's green eyes lifted, calm but unyielding. "Would you have listened to the coffee lady?" Torres had no answer. Later that afternoon, the briefing room filled again. The air smelled of burnt dust and adrenaline. Harrison stood at the front. Mary sat near the back, hood pulled low. "Effective immediately," Harrison began. "Fob Echo is under full counterintelligence lockdown. We've identified multiple internal leaks connected to external Taliban assets." He paused, glancing at Mary. "We also have confirmation that the sniper support during the Tangi ambush was internal." A murmur rippled through the room. Rodriguez spoke up. "Sir, with respect, it wasn't support, it was salvation." Harrison continued. "The individual responsible has asked not to be recognized. Their service record remains sealed." Mary looked down at her scarred hands. Outside, rotor blades thumped in the distance, another patrol preparing to launch. The rhythm was steady, comforting, almost hypnotic. Wells leaned close. "You could have stayed hidden. Why reveal yourself?" Mary thought for a long moment. "Because if I didn't, someone else would have died for my silence." Wells nodded slowly. "You're something else, Collins." Mary smiled faintly. "No, I'm just tired." That night the base gathered in the mess hall, unplanned, spontaneous, quiet. Soldiers from every division sat side by side, speaking in low voices. Rodriguez limped to the front, coffee mug in hand. "You all saw what happened out there," he said. "You've all heard the stories. I just want to say this: we mocked someone we didn't understand. And when the moment came, that person saved our lives." The crowd was silent, reverent. "Heroes come in all forms," he continued, voice rough. "Sometimes they don't wear rank. Sometimes they wear grease and make coffee at 400. He raised the mug, "To the ghost of Tangi Valley." Dozens of mugs lifted in reply. But Mary wasn't there to hear it. She stood outside in the cold, watching the lights flicker inside the hall. Her breath misted in the mountain air. She could hear their voices, laughter again, but softer this time. Not mockery, respect. She turned and looked toward the ridge in the distance. Ridge 447. It glowed faintly under moonlight, the place where ghosts had finally been laid to rest. At 2300 hours, Harrison called her to his office. He was waiting with Torres and Wells. A single document lay on his desk, heavy with classification stamps. "They want you back," Harrison said. "Full reinstatement, rank restoration, payback dated. You'd have your choice of assignments, training, advisory, special ops liaison." Mary didn't move. "They want Raven 9 back." "They want the best," Harrison said simply. Mary smiled sadly. "Raven 9 is dead, Colonel. She died with her team." Torres frowned. "You could teach at least, pass it on. They need people like you." Mary looked down at her hands. The tremor had returned, faint, rhythmic. "I already am." Wells tilted her head. "How do you mean?" Mary's eyes softened. "Every time Rodriguez picks up a wrench instead of his rifle, he's learning something. Every time a soldier treats the support crew with respect, that's training. You can't teach empathy from a podium. You show it." The colonel leaned back. "You're not going to change your mind, are you?" Mary shook her head. "I've had enough of ghosts." Harrison sighed, but there was a quiet admiration in his voice. "Then at least let me say this, whatever you call yourself now, you saved this base. You saved my men." Mary nodded. "I didn't save anyone, sir. I just returned a favor." When she left the office, Rodriguez was waiting outside, leaning against the wall. He offered a grin. "You turned down reinstatement, didn't you?" Mary smirked. "Word travels fast." He shrugged. "This base is a fishbowl. Secrets don't swim far." She paused. "Then keep this one safe." She handed him a small leather notebook. Inside, meticulous notes, communication codes, supply patterns, field observations. 2 years of quiet surveillance. Rodriguez looked down. "What is this?" "Insurance," she said, "in case the wrong people ever come back." He hesitated. "Why trust me with it?" "Because you learned," she said softly, "and because you listened when it mattered." He swallowed hard, emotion tightening his jaw. "Ma'am, I don't know how to thank you." Mary's smile was small, tired, but warm. "Then don't. Just live better than I did." Later, long after midnight, the base was silent again. The stars burned bright over the valley, cold and distant. Mary sat outside her quarters, cleaning the same mug she'd been using since she arrived. The one Rodriguez had knocked over that morning before everything changed. She ran her thumb over the hairline crack near the handle, the imperfection that made it real. Inside her pocket, the lone brass casing rested against her palm, the one she'd left on her workbench, the one that didn't belong to any shot. The 19th, the one still waiting. She whispered to the wind, "For the ones I couldn't save." The wind didn't answer. It didn't need to. Because in the distance, over Ridge 447, the stars flickered once like muzzle flashes fading into peace. What happens to a place when one person's silence teaches it how to listen? At Forward Operating Base Echo, change didn't come with speeches. It came quietly. The way dawn replaces night, slow, unnoticed, inevitable. After the ambush and the blackout, the mood shifted. The jokes grew kinder. The mockery stopped. No one rolled their eyes at the coffee lady anymore. In fact, most started showing up early, helping her clean the machine before patrols. Rodriguez noticed it first, that strange ripple effect she left behind without trying. A word of advice here, a sharp glance there. A calm question that stopped a young corporal from losing his temper. Mary never lectured, never corrected. She just lived differently, with discipline so quiet it felt like gravity. And little by little, the base adjusted its orbit around her. The morning started earlier now. By 400, the maintenance bay was already alive. Engines running, boots echoing, voices sharper, steadier. Mary moved between vehicles like a conductor of some mechanical orchestra. Every wrench turn, every checklist mark precise. She didn't raise her voice once, yet no one slacked off when she was near. Rodriguez and Santos worked beside her most mornings, learning more than they'd ever admit. Left tire pressures low, Mary said without looking up. Rodriguez checked. How the hell did you? She smirked faintly, the sound it made turning in. He chuckled, shaking his head. You hear everything, don't you? Used to, she said softly. Now I just listen. In the weeks that followed, Echo's performance improved across every metric: faster maintenance turnaround, fewer communication failures, tighter patrol coordination. The brass attributed it to new leadership standards. The soldiers knew better. They started calling her ma'am without irony. Someone even painted a raven silhouette on the corner of the motor pool door. She didn't ask who, she just let it stay. But not everyone welcomed the change. 2 weeks after the ambush, Captain Torres brought bad news. A memo had arrived from Central Command. Investigative review of classified conduct by former operative Raven 9. They're not happy you resurfaced, Torres said. Technically, you're a ghost file. They can't have you walking around without a chain of command. Mary's face stayed calm, but her jaw tightened. They're afraid of stories they can't control. Torres nodded. Exactly. They want you to come in quietly for a debrief. Mary wiped her hands on a rag. And if I refuse? Torres hesitated. Then they'll send someone to convince you. Mary gave a small, tired smile. They already did once. That night, Mary sat alone by the ridge. The valley below was peaceful, moonlight turning the rocks silver. She could still see the outlines of the burned vehicles, faint ghosts of that day. She thought of her team from Blackbird. Phoenix, Hammer, Ghost, Titan, Joker. 5 names carved into her memory deeper than any metal could reach. 5 graves with no bodies. She spoke their names quietly, the way one speaks to wind. Then she opened the small tin box she always carried. Inside, the 17 spent casings, polished and numbered. She pulled out one and rolled it between her fingers. 17, she whispered. 18 if you count me. Her hand trembled slightly, but her breathing stayed steady. The tremor wasn't fear. It was the body remembering what it used to be. Back on base, Rodriguez was watching her from a distance, arms crossed, eyes heavy with concern. He'd learned not to interrupt her when she went to the ridge. She went there often now, not to grieve but to think. Still, something about her solitude bothered him, the way she lingered just a little too long. Santos walked up beside him. You ever wonder what she's thinking? Rodriguez nodded slowly. Every day. She scares the hell out of me, Santos admitted. She scares everyone, Rodriguez said. Then he smiled faintly. That's how you know you can trust her. 2 weeks later, a new transport unit arrived at Echo, young, green, restless. Among them was a woman barely 20, with too much energy and not enough discipline. Her name was Private Layla Vaughn. Mary noticed her immediately, the impatience in her stride, the defiance in her eyes. It was like looking at her younger self in a mirror she hadn't asked for. On Vaughn's second day, she stormed into the motor pool, frustrated, throwing her wrench onto the floor. I didn't sign up to change tires, she snapped. I'm supposed to be out there, fighting. Mary looked up from the engine she was working on. Out there is easy, she said calmly. Out there, adrenaline makes decisions for you. In here, you have to think. Vaughn scoffed. You're just a mechanic. Rodriguez winced, waiting for the explosion, but Mary only nodded. You're right, she said. A mechanic keeps others alive. Fighters tend to die fast. Choose which one you want to be. For a moment, Vaughn's confidence faltered. Later that night, She found a note under her bunk pillow, a folded scrap of paper with 6 words written in neat block handwriting. Stillness is louder than gunfire. No signature, no explanation. But she knew who'd left it. Weeks passed. Echo began to run like a single organism, every part connected, aware. Mistakes still happened, but fewer, and when they did, no one hid them. They fixed them together. Torres started saying it in briefings. Echo leads by humility. The men called it the Collins effect. Mary hated the term, but she didn't argue. She'd learned long ago that some lessons needed names to survive. One afternoon, as the sun burned high and cruel, the base received a distress call from a supply convoy 20 clicks east, ambushed, pinned under heavy fire. Harrison turned to Rodriguez. "Gear up your team." Rodriguez nodded, then glanced toward Mary. She was already packing a field kit. "You're not going," Harrison said. "You're not on active status." Mary met his gaze. Neither were the men on that convoy. The colonel sighed. "You don't take orders well." She smiled faintly, only from results. They left in 2 armored vehicles. The road wound through valleys that looked too quiet, too symmetrical. Mary's instincts screamed long before the first shot cracked. "Contact left," Rodriguez shouted. RPGs streaked across the air. The lead Humvee exploded into fire. Shrapnel rained across the convoy. Mary's voice cut through the chaos. "Smoke, flank right, keep moving." It wasn't a suggestion. It was command, precise, confident, practiced. She dismounted, rifle in hand, and took position behind a ridge of rock. Her hands moved with old rhythm, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. Rodriguez covered her flank, watching in awe as she orchestrated the defense. Her orders simple, surgical, unshakable. 3 tangos left ridge, 7 seconds between reloads, use it. They did, and it worked. Within minutes, the attackers retreated, leaving smoke and silence. Rodriguez exhaled. "You still got it." Mary reloaded calmly. "You don't lose what costs you everything." When they returned to base, Harrison met them at the gate, fury hiding behind relief. "Do you even understand the risk you took?" he barked. Mary didn't argue. "Yes." He stared at her, ready to explode, then saw Rodriguez's expression, Santos's quiet nod, and the convoy's survivors stepping out behind them. The words died on his tongue. "You disobeyed orders," he said finally. Mary's tone was quiet. "I followed instinct." Harrison rubbed his temples. "You always do." That night, Rodriguez found her sitting by the hangar, cleaning her rifle under moonlight. He sat beside her, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I used to think bravery was about charging in. Turns out, it's about not running away from what's broken." Mary nodded slowly. "Then you've learned the hard part." He hesitated. "What about you?" She looked out toward the mountains. "I'm still learning how to forgive the part of me that survived." The words hung in the air, fragile, honest, real. Rodriguez didn't know what to say, so he just stayed. The 2 of them sat there in quiet, the hum of the generators fading into the night. Weeks later, Vaughn approached Mary during morning inspection. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." Mary raised an eyebrow. "Always." "I've been thinking about that note you left. Stillness is louder than gunfire. I didn't understand it at first." "And now?" Vaughn hesitated. "Now I think you meant that real strength doesn't need to prove itself." Mary smiled, a rare soft smile. "That's the closest anyone's ever gotten." Vaughn nodded, standing a little taller. Rodriguez watched from across the bay, shaking his head in quiet amusement. The student teaching without trying, the legend pretending she wasn't one. By the end of that month, Echo was unrecognizable. No more divisions between operators and support. No more arrogance, no more hierarchy of worth. People worked, ate, trained, and rested together. And somehow, everything ran smoother. Even Harrison admitted it. Whatever she's doing, he told Tors, it's working. Tors smiled. She's doing nothing, sir, we are. That evening, Mary sat alone in her quarters, the tin box of casings beside her. 17 lined in a row, the 18th missing. She whispered quietly, as if speaking to unseen company. They're learning, you'd have liked them, Phoenix. You too, Ghost, even Rodriguez, he's got that same fire. Her voice softened. Maybe that's what redemption looks like, not erasing what we did, but teaching someone else to do it better. She closed the box gently, like closing a chapter. Outside, the night hummed softly. The ridge stood quiet and eternal in the moonlight, no longer a scar but a guardian. And for the first time in years, Mary Collins, Raven 9, slept without her rifle beside her bed. Who comes for ghosts when the war forgets them? For Mary Collins, it happened on a Tuesday. 600 hours, calm skis, routine breakfast, quiet base. A Black Hawk landed without warning. No radio call, no scheduled transport, no insignia. The kind of visit that made everyone stop mid-sentence. Rodriguez watched from the motor pool, coffee steaming in his hand. That's not a supply run, he murmured. Mary was already there before the dust settled. 3 men stepped out, 1 pilot, 1 guard, and 1 in a pressed black jacket that didn't belong anywhere near a combat zone. The man removed his sunglasses, scanning the base with clinical detachment. When his gaze landed on Mary, he smiled thinly, like someone who'd found what he came for long before arriving. Raven 9, he said, it's been a long time. The air seemed to tighten around them. Mary's hands didn't move, but every muscle was ready. Name's Collins, she said flatly. He smiled again, not kind, not cruel, professional. You can call me Mason, Intelligence Directorate, we need to talk. They met in Harrison's office. The colonel stood stiffly behind his desk, expression unreadable. Mason sat across from him, relaxed, confident. Mary stood, arms crossed, silent. Appreciate your cooperation, Colonel, Mason said, eyes never leaving Mary. This won't take long. Harrison's jaw clenched. She's done more for this base than half my command staff, so you'll forgive me if I don't like spooks walking in unannounced. Mason's smirk didn't reach his eyes. Relax, Colonel, this isn't an arrest, it's a recall. Mary's voice broke the silence, calm and cold. I'm not under contract. You were, Mason replied. Technically, you still are. You signed a lifetime confidentiality clause with Delta. That means when we call, you answer. Mary didn't blink. Delta's dead. Delta's name, maybe, he said, not its purpose. He opened a slim folder, sliding a photograph across the table. It showed a convoy torn apart on a mountain road, smoke still rising. 3 weeks ago, Mason said. Northern Kunar, same ambush signature as Tangi Valley, snipers, traps, coordinated assaults. Our analysts think someone's replicating your methods. Mary studied the image, tire tracks, scatter pattern, ballistic impact points. She didn't speak. Mason leaned back. You trained a small unit before you went dark. We need to know if one of them's gone rogue. I didn't train anyone, she said. Really? Mason tilted his head. Because these kills, they're yours. Every angle, every rhythm, he stopped, smirking. Every 14 seconds. Harrison frowned. You're saying. I'm saying, Mason interrupted. Someone out there studied Raven 9 like scripture, and we want our help to stop it. Mary finally looked up. Her voice was quiet. And if I say no? Mason shrugged. Then someone else dies trying to clean up your legacy. The room was silent for a long time. Finally, Harrison spoke. She's not under your command anymore. Mason's eyes flicked to him, sharp and dismissive. No, but she's still responsible for the ghost she made. That hit harder than he knew. Mary's face didn't change, but her pulse did. Every word dragged her back to Blackbird, to her team's last stand, to the burning radio where her voice had gone unheard. "Give me 24 hours, she said finally. Mason smiled. "You'll take it and you'll leave at dawn. We have transport ready." He stood, collecting his folder. "You can pretend to be Mary Collins all you want, but out there, they only remember Raven." He left without a goodbye. The door shut behind him with the kind of silence that echoes. Harrison looked at her. "You're not going." Mary didn't answer. "Don't," he said. "That's an order." She met his gaze evenly. "You don't order ghosts, Colonel, you bury them." Then she walked out. Outside, Rodriguez was waiting. "Who was that?" "Someone who thinks he still owns me," she said. He followed her into the maintenance bay. "You're not really thinking about going, are you?" She set her rifle case on the bench. "Someone out there's using my pattern, my name, my mistake. I can't ignore that." "Mary." She stopped him with a look. "You know what happens when people copy the wrong thing, Rodriguez. They miss the meaning. They take the rhythm but not the restraint. That's how monsters are made." Rodriguez exhaled. "Then take me with you." "No." "Why not?" She turned back to him, her eyes softening. "Because some of us were meant to build again, not bleed again." He didn't argue. He just stood there, jaw tight, watching her check the scope on her rifle one more time. "Promise me one thing," she said quietly. "Anything." "If I don't come back, burn the tin box." That night, Mary walked the base one last time. Every sound, every smell, every face, she memorized them. Torres met her by the gate. "You're not cleared to leave," she said. "I was never cleared to stay," Mary replied. Torres hesitated. "What are you going to do out there?" Mary's expression was unreadable. "Find whoever's pretending to be me, and stop them before they make me into a legend I don't deserve." Torres swallowed. "You think they'll kill you?" Mary gave a faint smile. "They already tried once. I'm still here." The Black Hawk lifted at dawn. Rodriguez stood at the edge of the landing zone, the rising sun painting the dust in gold. He didn't salute. Neither did she. They just looked at each other, the soldier she'd saved, and the man who'd finally learned to see her. As the helicopter rose, the wind whipped through the base, rattling the metal siding, sending loose papers flying like white birds across the dirt. Torres muttered, "You think she'll come back?" Rodriguez didn't take his eyes off the sky. "No, but she'll finish it." Hours later, high in the Afghan mountains, the helicopter dropped her off at an abandoned outpost. Mason waited at the edge of the landing zone, arms crossed. "Welcome home, Raven," he said. She ignored him, scanning the horizon. The old structures were half buried in dust. Rusted antennas leaned like broken spines. "Base was hit twice last month," Mason said. "No survivors. Our drones picked up heat signatures a few clicks east. Whoever's out there, they know we're coming." Mary adjusted her pack, then stopped talking. He smirked. "You've really changed, haven't you?" "Not enough," she said. They moved out. The mountains swallowed sound. Only the crunch of boots on gravel, the faint hum of wind through the rocks. Mary led, scanning the ridgelines, every angle, every potential sniper nest. Her movements were instinctual, almost supernatural. Mason followed, slightly behind, watching her with a mix of awe and unease. "You don't use GPS." "Never needed it." "Right," he said. "You just feel your way through the Hindu Kush." Mary stopped, turning sharply. "You brought me here to find someone, not to talk." "Fair," he said. "But you should know something. The shooter we're tracking, she's female." Mary froze. "What?" Mason nodded. "Intel's calling her Raven's Echo. She's been copying your movements, your tactics, your code signatures. We think she was part of a black program, maybe one of the ones that studied your files after Blackbird." Mary's pulse slowed. "They tried to replace me." Mason shrugged. "Seems the replacement doesn't like staying in her cage." By midday, they reached a vantage point overlooking a narrow valley. Smoke curled from the remains of a convoy below. Mary set up her scope. Through the glass she saw a flash of movement on the opposite ridge. A shooter, female, long rifle, calm posture. Her own rhythm. Her own precision. But wrong. Too fast, too reckless. Got her, Mason whispered. 400 meters, authorization to engage. Mary's voice was low. No, not yet. Why not? Because she's not shooting to kill, Mary said softly. She's shooting to warn. Mason frowned. What the hell are you talking about? Mary's eyes stayed on the scope. She's not aiming for the heart. She's hitting tires, crates, walls, trying to scare someone off. A pause. Who? Mason asked. Mary exhaled. Us. The next shot cracked. Dirt exploded inches from Mason's boot. He stumbled back. She's targeting you. Mary stayed calm. No, she's testing me. The world slowed again, the way it always did when instinct took over. Mary adjusted her scope, reading the terrain. The girl's position was perfect: wind compensation, elevation, cover, a ghost in training. For the first time in years, Mary felt something like pride and fear. Because she knew what that kind of precision required: obsession. And obsession kills faster than bullets. She whispered into the wind, "All right, Echo, let's see what they taught you. How do you fight someone who learned from your mistakes?" Mary Collins lay prone behind the ridge, her rifle steady, breath slow. Wind from the west, 12 knots. Elevation advantage, 34 meters. Opposite her, nearly a kilometer away, a figure in desert camo mirrored her position exactly. Same breathing rhythm. Same shooting stance. Same 14-second intervals. It was like looking into a memory she never wanted back. Mason crouched nearby, jittery. She's good, real good. Mary didn't answer. Through the scope she could see the other sniper's face, partially hidden by a scarf, but young. Too young, maybe mid-20s, focused, controlled. A shadow of who Mary once was. Don't move, Mary whispered. She's measuring wind off our heat signatures. Mason swallowed. Can you hit her? I could, Mary said quietly, but that's not the point. They stayed in the stalemate for 23 minutes. Every shift of air, every glint of metal was a language between them. Two sharpshooters communicating in silence. Mason fidgeted, breaking the rhythm. She's not firing. Why isn't she firing? Mary kept her eye on the scope. Because she doesn't want to kill me. She wants to be seen. And then a single shot. The round sliced through the fabric of Mary's hood, missing her ear by an inch. Clean, controlled, a warning. Mason dove for cover. She's insane. No, Mary murmured. She's asking a question. Mary's radio crackled. A female voice came through, calm, deliberate. Raven 9, confirm ID. Mason looked at her. She's talking to you. Mary hesitated, then pressed her transmitter. This is Raven 9. Silence, then the girl's voice again, almost reverent. I didn't believe you were real. Believe what you want, Mary said. I studied everything, the voice continued. The missions, the rhythm, the ratios, you were perfect. Mary's stomach turned. Perfection gets people killed. You saved hundreds, the girl said. That's what they told us. Mary's tone sharpened. Who? A long pause. Then, Project Mirrored Wing, Directorate Training Division. We were told you were the model, that your method was flawless. They built simulations off your mission data. They called it the Raven Protocol. Mason's eyes widened. Jesus. Mary whispered, You're one of Mason. The radio clicked again, quieter this time. Not anymore. Then the line went dead. The first shot came less than 10 seconds later. A round smashed into the rock beside Mary's rifle, shattering it into dust. The duel had begun. Mary rolled, calculating angles. The girl had repositioned already, fast, smarter than expected. Mary steadied her breathing. Wind 10 west, dropped 2 inches. She fired. The bullet clipped the girl's cover, just a graze, intentional. A warning of her own. Through the scope she saw the girl pause, conflicted, hesitating. Mary took the opportunity to speak, soft, measured. "You don't have to do this." The girl's reply was immediate, raw. "You don't get to tell me that. You left us." Mary froze. "What?" "They said you abandoned the program. That because of you, 6 trainees died in simulation when the parameters went wrong. That you refused to teach." Mary's throat tightened. "That's not what happened." "Then tell me what did," the girl shouted, voice breaking over the calm. The echo bounced between the ridges, a cry disguised as a threat. Mary lowered her rifle slightly, her voice softening. "They lied to you. The program was never meant to create more of me. It was supposed to end what I was." "Then why am I here?" Mary hesitated. "Because someone kept it alive." The girl's next shot came closer. "You left us with ghosts. You think you're the only one who remembers names. I remember mine, Cadet 12. No name, just a number. You were our myth, our impossible standard." Mary swallowed hard. "They weaponized your belief." "You were belief," the girl hissed, "and then you disappeared." Another shot cracked, grazing Mary's shoulder. Pain blossomed sharp and immediate. She bit it down, breathing steady. Mason tried to crawl closer. "You're hit." "Stay down," she said. Her voice shook, not from pain, from recognition. The cadence, the control, the fury. She remembered feeling that once, staring down through glass at men who'd betrayed everything sacred. She switched frequencies. "Echo, listen to me. You're not saving anyone by doing this." "You don't get it," the girl said, voice trembling. "They killed my team last year, a field test gone wrong, said it was classified. I found the reports. Blackbird all over again. Same lies, same signatures. I thought if I proved I could beat you, they'd have to hear me." Mary's breath caught. "You're fighting me to be heard." "No, to end what started with you." Silence again. The mountains held their breath. Then movement. The girl shifted position, sprinting across exposed ground to a better vantage. Mary didn't fire, couldn't. Instead, she whispered, "You don't have to become what they built." "Then show me another way." Mary's heart cracked a little at the sound, desperate, angry, pleading. The voice of a soldier who'd never been taught peace. She closed her eyes. "All right." Then she stood. Mason's eyes went wide. "What the hell are you doing?" Mary ignored him, slinging her rifle across her back and stepping into full view, no cover, no camouflage. The wind tore at her jacket, the raven emblem catching the sun. Across the valley, the girl froze. Through her own scope, she saw her idol standing tall, exposed, unafraid. Mary raised her hand slowly. "You want to end Raven 9, she called. "Then take the shot right here." A long pause. The girl's breathing echoed faintly over the radio, uneven now. "Don't make me." "I'm not making you do anything," Mary said softly. "I'm giving you the choice I never had." Seconds stretched like hours. Then the click of a rifle bolt, the metallic breath before judgment. Mary waited. But no shot came. The radio crackled again. The girl's voice was shaking. "If I walk away, they'll find me. They'll call me a traitor." Mary's tone was steady, almost maternal. "Then be one." "Why?" "Because loyalty without truth is just another cage." A single tear slid down Mary's cheek, unseen, unacknowledged. Across the ridge, the girl lowered her rifle. The metallic echo of it hitting stone carried farther than any gunfire. Mary exhaled slowly. Relief, sadness, release, all tangled together. "Good," she whispered. But before she could say more, Mason stood up behind her, raising his sidearm. "Target disarmed. I've got a clean shot." Mary spun, fury igniting. "Stand down." "She's a rogue agent, Raven. You know the protocol. Mary stepped in front of him, blocking his aim. That's not your call. Mason's jaw tightened. Move. Mary's voice dropped to a whisper sharp enough to cut steel. You point that weapon again, and you'll regret it. For a moment, Mason's hand trembled, torn between duty and survival. Then slowly, he lowered the gun. Mary turned back to the ridge. The girl Echo was gone. By the time they crossed the valley, the position was empty. Only a rifle left behind, same make, same model, same careful wrap of cloth around the stock. Mary picked it up. On the side of the barrel, etched faintly by hand, were two words. For the ones you saved. Mason stared. You let her go. Mary looked at the horizon. No, I set her free. He exhaled. Command won't see it that way. They never do. They made camp that night in the ruins of the old outpost. The fire burned low, shadows long. Mason sat across from her, studying her face. Why didn't you take the shot? Mary looked into the flames. Because I remembered what it felt like to be her, cornered by systems that mistake obedience for purpose. Killing her would have been easy. Listening was harder. You think she'll survive out there? Mary nodded slowly. If she remembers to stop counting seconds between breaths. Mason frowned. What does that mean? It means, she said softly, she's still human. They returned to base 2 days later. Tors met them at the landing zone, concern etched into her face. Report says you went off comms for 48 hours. What happened out there? Mason opened his mouth, but Mary spoke first. We found what we needed. It's over. Tors studied her. You sure? Mary's gaze drifted toward the mountains. No, but I'm at peace with what is. That evening, Rodriguez found her sitting by the ridge again, staring at the horizon. You found her, didn't you? He said quietly. Mary nodded. She wasn't the threat they thought. Who was she? Mary smiled faintly. A reminder. Rodriguez sat beside her. Of what? That even the best weapons eventually learn to lay themselves down. The wind carried her words away, scattering them into the valley where echoes never die. They just fade, softer each time until they sound like forgiveness. What happens when the war inside you finally stops fighting back? For Mary Collins, it began with a sunrise. The kind that didn't look like victory, just light returning where it was once afraid to go. Dawn spilled over the mountains, washing Ridge 447 in pale gold. The same ridge that once echoed with gunfire now stood still, untouched. She sat there alone, her rifle beside her, her hands resting on her knees. The valley below was quiet. No smoke, no shouting, no ghosts, just wind whispering through the grass like it was trying to remember a song. She hadn't slept since returning from Cunnar. The girl Raven's echo haunted her in ways the dead never did, not because of what almost happened, but because of what didn't. Mary had pulled the trigger on thousands of lives, but that day, for the first time, she chose not to. And somehow that hurt more. When she came back to base, no one asked questions, not this time. They'd learned by now that silence from Mary Collins meant something was ending or beginning, sometimes both. Tors greeted her with a small nod. Mason filed his report, she said. They're closing the case. Mary's eyebrows rose slightly. Closing it how? Officially, Tors said, the rogue sniper was neutralized. Mary smiled faintly. Dead men tell no paperwork. Tors hesitated. You did the right thing. Maybe, Mary said softly, but the right thing doesn't always stay clean. Tors looked like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. Instead, she handed Mary a sealed envelope. From command, you're officially cleared, no charges, no recall. Mary took it, turning it over in her hand, then slid it unopened into her pocket. Freedom doesn't come in envelopes. Tors smiled sadly. Then what does it come in? Mary's eyes lifted toward the ridge. Forgiveness, if you're lucky. Over the next few days, she worked in silence again, just as before. Engines, wrenches, checklists, the rhythm of normal life. But something was different now. The soldiers weren't watching her with curiosity anymore. They were learning from her through imitation, not instruction. Rodriguez was the first to notice it. He found Vaughn at the rifle range one afternoon, calm, deliberate, counting her breath the same way Mary once had. "Wind 7 left," she murmured, adjusting her scope. "Drop 2 clicks." The shot rang out perfect. Rodriguez grinned. "Where'd you learn that?" Vaughn didn't look up. "Coffee lady." Later that week, Rodriguez visited Mary in the bay. She was sitting on the floor, fixing a broken fuel pump, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back in that familiar no-nonsense knot. He leaned on the doorway. "You ever get tired of pretending you're not the legend everyone whispers about?" Mary didn't glance up. "Legends are for people who want to be remembered. I just want the engines to work." Rodriguez smiled. "Too late, you're already a ghost story." Mary paused, setting her wrench down. "Then make sure they tell it right." He frowned. "How that?" She met his eyes. "Tell them I wasn't fearless. Tell them I was tired, angry, and still showed up anyway. That's all bravery ever was." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You know, I think that's the first thing you've said that sounds like hope." Mary smirked. "Don't get used to it." That night the base gathered for a remembrance service, unofficial, quiet. No medals, no speeches. Just candles, photographs, and names read aloud for those lost in the valley. When it was over, Harrison called Mary to the front. She resisted at first, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He handed her a folded flag, not hers, not her team. It belonged to the SEALs she'd saved. Rodriguez stood beside her, voice steady. "You don't know what that day meant to us. We went out expecting to die, but we didn't, because you didn't forget how to fight." Mary looked at the flag for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "You give this to Vaughn. She's the next one who'll need to understand what it costs." The crowd was silent. Harrison nodded. "We'll honor that." Mary placed the flag down gently, as if laying a memory to rest. 2 days later, the Black Hawk returned. Same rotor hum, same dust storm. Mason stepped out again, not in a suit this time, but in fatigues. Less arrogance, more weariness. He approached her quietly. "Command wants me to thank you." "Command's late," Mary said. He smiled faintly. "They usually are." Then softer, "You should know the girl made it. We tracked a transmission near the Pakistani border. Civilian frequency. She's alive." Mary's lips twitched into something between relief and sorrow. "Good." "She didn't shoot you," Mason said. "She didn't need to," Mary replied. "She understood." He nodded slowly. "You ever think of coming back?" Mary looked at the horizon. "No, I'm finally where I was supposed to be." Mason studied her for a long moment, then reached into his jacket and handed her a small drive. Every classified file on Project Mirrored Wing, every lie they buried. I figured you'd want to decide what happens to it. Mary turned it over in her hand, then dropped it into a metal bin and poured oil over it. Mason blinked. "You're just burning it." Mary struck a match. The flames caught instantly, curling up like orange ghosts. "Some truths," she said quietly, "aren't meant to live forever." Mason didn't argue. When he left, she didn't watch him go. That evening, Mary packed her few belongings, a toolkit, a mug, a single photograph from Blackbird. She walked through the motor pool one last time, running her hand over the hoods of vehicles she'd repaired 100 times. Rodriguez met her at the gate. "You're leaving." Mary nodded. "Echo doesn't need me anymore." He frowned. "You really think this place would have changed without you?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but that's the point of doing it right so they can." He reached out, pressing something into her hand. It was the brass casing she'd given him months ago, the 19th. "You forgot this," he said. Mary looked down at it. The small engraving glinted in the moonlight. She closed her hand around it. "No, Sergeant, I left it for when the story ended." Rodriguez swallowed. "Then is this goodbye?" Mary's eyes softened. "No, just the part where I stopped being the ghost." He didn't salute. She didn't either. They just stood there in the quiet, soldier and mechanic, teacher and student, friends born from war's strange mercy. Then she turned and walked into the dawn. Weeks passed. Echo remained changed, alive, proud. The ridge became a landmark, unofficially called Raven's Rest. Rodriguez led the new recruits now. Vaughn handled logistics. Torres moved up to Intel Command. And Harrison, he kept a single photograph in his office. A woman in a grease-stained jacket standing beside a Humvee, smiling faintly, unaware someone had taken her picture. On the back, written in clean, block handwriting, "Fix everything you can, forgive what you can't." Months later, far from Echo, a small village near Jalalabad stirred at dawn. Children ran through the streets, laughter echoing against stone walls. At the edge of the village, a woman in plain clothes taught them how to mend old farming equipment, her hair streaked with silver, her hands scarred, her smile soft. One of the kids pointed at the faint tattoo on her wrist, a small raven, barely visible. "What's that, teacher?" She paused, looking at it. For a moment, her eyes filled with ghosts and sunlight. "It's a reminder," she said gently, "that even the quiet ones have wings." Back at Echo, Rodriguez stood at the ridge during sunset. The wind brushed past him, carrying faint echoes, maybe of gunfire, maybe of memory. He pulled the small brass casing from his pocket, the one she'd once held. On its base was a new engraving, R9 Never Again. He placed it on the ground, balanced carefully between two stones. Then he whispered, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The wind lifted through the valley like an answer.